I I would call on Premier Smith to work with us constructively to ensure that these regulations are the most efficient for all Canadians. And we will be as well looking at the oil and gas cap regulations that will be coming up by the end of the year, as the Prime Minister announced last week in New York. But there will be no carve out for a province.
CO2 emissions are up across Canada, down in Alberta and Saskatchewan, after repeatedly attacking the provinces for opposing the federal carbon tax and advocating against unscientific emissions caps in oil and gas. It is indeed Trudeau and his Environment Minister Stephen Guilbeault who are not meeting their own self-imposed climate targets.
In regards to my environment minister, I have tremendous faith and confidence in my environment minister. And if people are having a trouble getting along with him, maybe they need to look at their own approach to these big issues, as opposed to looking at what he's talking about, which is consistent with building a better future for everyone.
New data shows that Stephen Guilbeault's escalating carbon tax, the forced adoption of electric vehicles by 2035, his emissions cap on industry and electricity, methane targets, and threatened fertilizer ban on farmers have not reduced greenhouse gas emissions in Canada. Now, according to Blacklock's reporter, a national inventory report compiled by the Department of Environment showed emissions went up in 2022, according to the most recent available data. Greenhouse gases totaled 708 million tons, up 9.3 million tons from the previous year.
I have a good relationship with many of the federal ministers, and I'm really hopeful as we put our table together that we're going to come to some constructive approach so that we can reach carbon neutrality by 2050. But I have to say, I'm constantly dismayed that Environment Minister Stephen Guilbeault continues to take shots against our province as we're trying to begin this collaborative process. He should be coming to the table in good faith, and he should zip it, quite frankly.
Oh, but do you know which provinces are leading the way in reducing CO2 emissions? If you care about those sorts of things, and I don't, but the left and Stephen Guilbeault and Justin Trudeau, well, they all say they do.
Premier, when you talk about national unity crisis, I think of Stephen Guilbeault, who, as far as I know, is the only minister that has been in handcuffs and in an orange jumpsuit. Can you please speak a little bit about how dangerous his ideology is when it comes to our clean, responsible, low-carbon energy sector for Alberta and Canada's prosperity?
I should just make sure the committee knows exactly why Stephen Guilbeault faced law problems. One was for the stunt he pulled on the CN Tower. The other was that he climbed on the roof of our Premier, Ralph Klein, when his wife Colleen was home, terrifying her. So you can imagine how Albertans feel that this is the person now responsible for enacting emissions policy.
Ah, yes. It's us Western Canadian climate criminals, the ones who grow the food and love our fossil fuel industry, the ones Stephen Guilbeault accused in January of wanting to, quote, tear Canada down. Yes, it's Alberta and Saskatchewan leading the way in CO2 emissions reductions. Again, if you care about those sorts of things, I don't, but the Liberals do. According to the same Blacklock's article, the national inventory figures showed only two provinces, Alberta and Saskatchewan, seeing declines in emissions year over year. Alberta emissions fell from 271 to 270 million tons in 2022. Saskatchewan emissions fell from 77 to 76 million tons. Data from all other provinces were unchanged or saw an increase in emissions. Ontario had the largest gain from 151 to 157 million tons. Alberta's Premier, Danielle Smith, was of course right, as she tends to be these days. Perhaps the Environment Minister should be fired because he's failed at his job.
I let him know that I don't have as great a relationship as one of his other ministers, or with one of his other ministers, and I expressed my desire in person that if he chose to make a change in that portfolio, I'd be happy to have a reset in our relationship on that front. But we're going to work on the things that we can work together on.
If you or I failed as much as Trudeau and Guilbeault, would you be fired? I guess we'll find out in October 2025.